all this stuff tells us about ourselves.
That's where you leave a lot of tears.
I look at this collection as being a people's collection. This is a sacred trust.
Dear Vietnam soldier, thank you for all you did for our country and risking your lives.
It was conceived as a gash in the ground, a wound in the earth. The designer envisioned a polished granite surface that would reflect life in death. Their engraved names would be a powerful memorial to those who died too young. The Vietnam veteran who pushed for its creation wanted to find a way to heal embattled and embittered veterans and to help soothe a society still divided by a controversial conflict. But no one foresaw that from its opening in 1982, people would come to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial and leave mementos.
There's teddy bears and high school rings and old photographs that mamas bring.
Large and small, personal and military, obvious and mysterious. Offerings at the wall.
There's combat boots he used to wear when he was sent over there. And there's 50,000 names carved in the wall.
Month after month, year after year, decade after decade, the offerings have been left. In 1986, the National Park Service organized them into a formal collection, now located outside of the District of Columbia in suburban Maryland.
It's impossible for any one person to know all there is about this collection. I always tell people that there are at least 125,000 to maybe 150,000 objects in this collection.
That's more than 2 times as many objects as names on the wall. By Memorial Day 2010, there were 58,267. A few are added each year as additional fatalities are verified. Dory Felton has been the only curator all this has ever had. He's a wounded Vietnam veteran himself who recognized objects no one else understood.
I knew what they were. I said, you know, those are military pajamas, that's a souvenir sword from Thailand, whatever.
There's a great deal of whatever in the thousands of plastic boxes where most of the objects are stored. They range from elaborate, carefully prepared offerings to notes written on the spur of the moment on brown paper bags.
I surmise that someone probably came to the wall, overcome with emotions, and they had to put this down in chapter and verse. This is great literature in this collection. This is first-hand accounts. It is unaltered. It is unedited. It will punch you in the stomach. But this collection is also a celebration of life.
There are favorite foodstuffs and clothing, alcohol and cigarettes, birthday cards and Easter baskets. Sometimes there are explanatory notes. More often, there are not.
There's an empty champagne bottle and 2 goblets, but there's no message, no photographs. And I've often wondered if this was dreams deferred. There's so many stories that you could probably visualize. We have in this collection numerous trifold flags. This one is a captain, Special Forces, United States Army. There's no supporting donor information. This is our famous hippy-dippy hat, as we call it. And this is reminiscent of some of the headgear from the 60s.
Young professionals, graduate students, and interns record and carefully catalog each object as it comes in. Park rangers collect everything except perishable items like flowers and many foodstuffs. The plan is to one day have all this information available on the internet. Dory advises the catalogers not to judge or interpret the objects.
Integrity is very important. That's some of the things I try to impress upon the interns here, because many of them are young, and about 60% of today's population was not alive during Vietnam. They don't have a clue as regards to Vietnam.
Dory himself tries not to overinterpret, but he does say he often feels like he's an uninvited onlooker, peeking over the shoulders of the people as they leave things.
We know it's important to them, these objects. In a way, it's a sense of vulnerability they are displaying. So we're coming behind them and we're looking at these boxes. And, you know, we ask questions amongst us. I wonder what this is for, what that's for. Yeah. But we're voyeurs.
In a locked cabinet, 4 sets of General Stars, left by former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Peter Pace, to honor 4 Marines who served under him in 1968.
As a young man, he acted as a platoon leader in the Vietnam War. Each of these white index cards that are inscribed with the name represent and honor those individuals who were killed under his command.
They scan the wall and find his name. The teardrops fall like pouring rain. Then silently they leave a gift and go.
Initially, it seemed to be sort of a one-time event that was tied to the emotion of this new monument in Washington and all of these military veterans and others who had all of this sort of psychological baggage that they were dealing with.
Vietnam vet Jan Scruggs led the struggle to create the memorial, approved by Congress, funded with private donations, and built on public land, all in the course of 3 years. He thought it was something that was needed for individual veterans and for the whole country.
Just as individual participants and family members need to deal with trauma in Vietnam, does the nation as a whole, as a collectivity, need a symbol of reconciliation, of healing.
As opposition to the Vietnam War rose in the country, the homecoming was tough for most returning vets, sometimes downright hostile, even if they only came home for leave.
I made the mistake of going to a place where people my age would hang out at that time in uniform. And it was a bad experience.
People really were angry at the military veterans of the war for being a part of the military.
Betty Jo Kiefer, who was growing up at the end of the Vietnam years, has 3 sons who have deployed. Their experience has been completely different.
My boys are received very well when they come back. People stop them, shake their hands, thank them for their service. It's just a totally different world for my sons when they come home, especially when they're in uniform.
Some believe that recent appreciation for service is due in part to the existence of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, that the wall has had genuine healing power for the country.
It was not a memorial to glorify war. It's not a memorial of any kind other than to honor the soldiers.
Tony Fasolo attended the dedication ceremony in 1982.
When I first saw it, I was a little struck by what was called the black gash in the ground. I have to admit that. But then I realized when you walk down there, if you walk along the wall, you feel like you're part of it.
Tony wasn't with a combat unit in Vietnam. His group was responsible for reporting the names of all the dead and wounded back to the Department of the Army. For several years, he's been volunteering on special days at the wall.
Why? It just struck me that, you know, my job wasn't done yet. I still had, as a casualty guy, I still had something that I needed to do. And that maybe I could bring some comfort to people and talk to them about the war and try to explain it wasn't the way you see it like in the movies.
There's no such thing as a Vietnam experience, just as there's no such thing as an Iraqi, Afghanistan experience. Dependent upon when you were in country, what you were doing in country had a lot to do with your experience. They were Vietnam experiences.
Offerings at the wall are contemporary history.
all this stuff tells us about ourselves, and that's what an archaeologist does. We find stuff to talk about what we were like. And I think all of these objects talk about us and what we believe in, what we think about, what hurts us, what makes us feel better, all those things.
Little American flags waving in the wind, and there's 50,000 names carved in the wall.
The seat is for our brothers and sisters on the wall when they come home.
The Vietnam Veterans Memorial Collection contains objects that can be regarded as kind of a social history of America in recent decades.
This is a history written by the everyday person. For lack of a better term, we're talking about from the ground up instead of in the past from the top down.
Bob Hogman Thompson is one of the notable authors of that rewrite of social history. When he returned to Wisconsin from Vietnam, he became a biker, joined the Hell's Henchmen Motorcycle Club. He was a member for a handful of years, but kept riding afterward. He forgot about Vietnam, or tried to.
It was a hard transition for everybody. We didn't come home to a parade. We didn't come home to anything. We come home pretty shameful, I think.
He'd been a member of a Marine radio relay team in country in 1968 and 1969.
You learn so much, you grow up fast. Like, let's say your buddy gets shot, well, you take the time to make sure he's gotten to a place where he can be taken care of. But you don't have time to sit around and moan too much about what's fair, what's not fair. He got shot. Thank God I didn't. It was moving out the next day, going somewhere else, doing something.
When the Vietnam Veterans Memorial opened in 1982, he didn't think much about it.
It was just another thing from Washington, D.C., trying to make the vets feel better and stuff like that. I didn't read too much about it. What happened in 1968 when I came back, I forgot it. I wanted nothing to do with it.
Then he decided to participate in the annual Rolling Thunder Run. Rolling Thunder started small in 1987 and had grown to an estimated 350,000 bikes by 2008. Motorcyclists from across the country converge on Washington, D.C. on Memorial Day. The goal? Bring attention to the prisoners of war and the missing in action still unaccounted for from the Vietnam years and beyond. On his first run, Hogman finally saw the wall.
It was a whole new experience for me, but I shed no tears.
But he noticed all the objects at the wall, and on a later run, Hogman started thinking about what the state of Wisconsin could leave. He was thinking something big.
Something that we could do, something that we could bring from Wisconsin that meant something to a lot of people. I thought of, how about a Harley-Davidson?
Harley-Davidson was founded in Wisconsin, but the wall bike would be no ordinary showroom hog.
How this started was actually Hoggy and Pollock come up along with other people, came up with an idea to maybe build a bike as a commemorative, as in memory of all the brothers and sisters.
Over the course of the next year or so, the idea evolved. Build a custom motorcycle from scratch, with major parts donated from across the state. Master motorcycle restorer Willie Kiefert was asked to put it all together.
We had to kind of build it, take it all apart, then paint it, fit everything. I think it took, Hoggy, what did it take us, a year?
1 year.
1 year, eh? I think it took us a year.
A frame was donated, then altered to make it more level. A design contest was run for the paint job on the gas tank and fenders. Every detail was to have meaning.
We had the dog tags made There's one for every one of the 37 servicemen that were listed as missing in action from Vietnam.
The seat was never sat on. The seat is for our brothers and sisters on the wall when they come home, so they'll have a place to ride with us.
We wanted it to be a bike that would reflect the era where we came back. And this bike wasn't built to give to the United States government. This bike was built for the 58,000 plus people on the wall. This is their bike, nobody else's.
Okay, first down in the left here we got Mongo. Then we have Kickstand and Jen. We got Polak and Marlene, Deb and Shooter.
The bike was left at the wall as part of Rolling Thunder Weekend in 1995, an offering the Park Service at first didn't know how to accept. But Hogman and his group helped transport it to the warehouse.
We took it over there, and it's been sitting there, and they've been watching it ever since. They're doing a good job over there. Thank you so much.
It's become one of the stars of the collection, shown all over the country when museums mount exhibits of wall offerings. It always travels with a plaque commemorating all the people who contributed to its creation.
We just are all part of it. It has been my pleasure. I've been honored to be able to contribute.
In the spring of 2010, the VFW posted a $1 million bond so the Park Service would let Hogman bring the bike back to Wisconsin to restore it to its original condition. New tires, a repaint job, and careful touch-ups of small dings and details.
What year does that quarter say?
The bike was shown at a Vietnam Veterans Homecoming observance in Wisconsin, then returned to the collection over Memorial Day weekend.
The Park Service might be holding on to it, but it belongs to the guys on the wall, our buddies that didn't come back from Vietnam. This is their bike. Anytime we're out for a ride, they're riding right next to us on this.
Hogman lives in the vicinity of Holy Hill, a monastery and church that can be seen for miles, a Wisconsin landmark. On a roadside scale, Hogman's place is a shrine to Vietnam vets and to POW MIAs. People leave offerings in his yard all the time. He's grown to appreciate the national monument hundreds of miles away that inspired the idea of public offerings.
It's definitely a healing process that you go through at the wall. That's where you leave your heart, that's where you leave your thoughts, that's where you leave a lot of tears, and nothing wrong with that.
You should all go there once in a lifetime because you need to see like what we saw.
Since 1996, fifth graders at South Scotland Elementary School have been making an annual bus trip to Washington, D.C. For the majority of the students who go, the trip is a major highlight of their school career. The big kids have been hearing about it since pre-kindergarten.
When I went to Washington, it was like pop. Everything just started getting excited in fifth grade.
And it was a 7-hour trip. And yeah, I couldn't go to sleep because I was so excited.
You should all go there once in a lifetime because you need to see like what we saw, the stuff that we saw.
The class visits D.C. area landmarks like Mount Vernon, the Capitol, the White House. They attend a changing of the guard at the Tomb of the Unknowns, even participating in a wreath ceremony. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial has always been on the itinerary.
Each group is going to get to pick one monument. Vietnam and you guys said the White House.
Ryan Curley's social studies class spent much of the year researching the places they would visit. Now, after the trip, more research, using the internet and turning the whole exercise into kind of a technology game. Ryan himself is younger than the wall. Vietnam is discussed as part of an overview of wars in American history.
After we talk about Vietnam and after we talk about the military and things of that nature, I actually let the kids discuss what they think. What is the military? What is going over into fighting in another country, maybe for a cause you don't even understand? What is that? And then they talk about it, and that leads us to writing a letter. And I think that's what opens up lets the kids try to connect with the person they're writing to and not just make it about themselves.
The letter I wrote it, and I thanked them for fighting in the war for us, because that was a very brave thing to do.
I asked them, I said, I have a person in my family that is in the war in Iraq now, and I know that they don't get to come home very often and see their people. And I know back then that y'all had no choice to go over there, and y'all never knew when y'all was going to get shot.
I wrote, "Dear Vietnam soldier, trooper, thank you for all you did for our country and risking your lives to save the United States."
The letter writing and the trip started under social studies teacher Shirley Royals, now retired. When her classes researched the places to visit on the very first trip, the students saw pictures of mementos left at the wall.
And the children were just curious as to why people did this and to whom they were left. And we would talk about, a lot were family and family members, and some were actually leaving them to relatives that are deceased. And from that, we came up with the idea that they could write their own letter to leave as a keepsake.
Teachers and students alike come back touched by the act of placing the letters at the wall and actually seeing the memorial.
There was a lot of emotions just walking past the wall, like sadness and a lot of stuff.
They're very calm because they know what it represents, and they're just walking and like just running their hands down the wall too as they go, and then looking at some of the names.
A lot of them walk up to the wall and they want to touch it and feel it, and I don't know if that's just their concrete way of saying this is actually a real thing. These are real people that were alive at one time and now they're gone or not here, or they don't know what happened to them.
Well, I thought, well, that's a lot of soldiers, and well, I felt bad because all of them soldiers lost their life or they got lost.
I was amazed because I didn't know that many people had fought and died in the war.
The children choose whether to leave their letters along the wall or put them in a container at the apex.
My grandpa, he fought in the Vietnam War. And when we put it down, I almost was gonna cry because when he had died 2 months ago, and remembering him was actually sad.
The names of 9 men from Laurinburg are engraved.
I have a list of the local people that are deceased and their names are on the wall, and I always try to place one of the letters close to that location.
Dear Tyler, my wife and I.
In 2010, a response. Richard Vastias, a Vietnam veteran and retired school teacher from Pennsylvania, picked up Tyler Bird's letter, read it, and wrote back.
You and your classmates have done a wonderful thing to write to us, old-timers.
Tyler's one of the handful of military kids in South Scotland. His father is deployed to Iraq.
I included the Army because my dad's in the Army, and I just thought that'd be interesting if somebody got to read it. And I talked about their freedom because I wanted to thank you about freedom.
Richard Vastias flew Marine helicopters in 1965 and 66, but he didn't spend many words on his Vietnam service. Instead, he asked Tyler about himself.
Do you like music? Do you play a sport? Do you like a sport? Tell me a specific player you like off that team.
The letter was written in cursive, which is no longer taught at South Scotland, so Tyler at first had a hard time reading it. Given the choice of taking it home or first reading it in school, he picked social studies class.
And I read it to them, and another teacher then took it in her reading class, and they read it to Tyler's reading class. and they just had a ball with it. They were so excited, and I think every child really hopes now they get a letter back.
And Tyler hopes he has a pen pal.
Yeah, I was happy when I got it because I didn't think I was going to get wrote back. And yeah, I'm happy I got to get wrote back because now I can just send him a letter, he sent me a letter back.
An underground education center will be built near the Vietnam Veterans Memorial for new 5th graders from Laurinburg and other future visitors. It will display a selection of the Park Service collection. The offerings continue to come at the wall. It has become a bridge between Vietnam vets and those who opposed the conflict. And
it's really gone beyond that, and it's become an educational device for people who have no recollection of Vietnam. Half of the people who visit the memorial are literally younger than the memorial. They're younger than age 25. I mean, forget the Vietnam War. That's even longer.
the South Scotland Elementary School letters will wind up at the warehouse in Maryland, where they'll be stored away for researchers and museum curators down the road, along with items like this perfectly good guitar missing one string that showed up with no explanation.
So again, the viewers may contrive their own stories as to why it was left.
The wall still resonates deeply with the Vietnam generation, but it's also found meaning to those who were born long after the conflict ended. It's still the most visited memorial in Washington, D.C., and it will serve as an enduring testament to those who died in Southeast Asia and to the ultimate sacrifice anyone serving in the military may have to make. I'm Staff Sergeant Brian Buckwalter. Thanks for watching Recon.